And
I just need to go forward.
Just go forward.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess.
Okay.
And let's see if your slides come up spontaneously. Do I need to do the slide for you?
Good morning, everyone.
Right? No, it wasn't.
I thought we'd try and energize everyone. My name is Carol Taketomo, and I'm the Director of Pharmacy and Clinical Nutrition at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. In a way, I kind of feel like the Lone Ranger here from the West Coast. Everyone here is either from Canada or, again, from an international area. I was hoping that when I came here, some of your wonderful kind of English-like accent would rub on me, and I would be able to go back home and everyone would be impressed, but it doesn't look like it. 3 days wasn't enough to get that talent.
If you press that, right? Hold on.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Well, first, I would like to thank Martin and Lauren for organizing and for hosting this wonderful symposium. And this symposium is giving those of us in the audience who have a passion for pediatrics the opportunity to exchange ideas, hopefully promote research in areas, because we have so many unanswered questions in regards to pediatric therapy. And maybe we have a chance to discuss innovative, safe practices to advance pediatric therapy for our patients. It doesn't matter if you're a U.S. patient or a Canadian patient. I know we all have a passion for children. So again, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Martin. Uh-oh. The disclosure. I need to go backwards for just for disclosure purposes. There is no conflict of interest that I need to report. Although, it's not there. No, it's gone. It's not there. It's okay. That's fine. I will continue on. Okay. I thought I would take this time to share with you how we decided to develop the Children's Hospital Handbook, Dosage Handbook, and Formulary. Looking in the audience, most of you are really kind of young, and you might not be able to empathize with what I went through in the 1980s as a new pharmacist. You know, I call 1980s BC. BC is before computer. And so there were challenges that we faced, and one of them was when we needed dosing information, we would run to the medical library and search for an article to be able to support information on dosing. We had no centralized repository for our pediatric drug information. We did have a list of drugs that we purchased, and supposedly that was adequate enough to tell the Joint Commission we had a formulary. But within that list, there was no information or no data structure to give us information on how to dose the drug. It didn't even give us information in terms of adverse reactions. So again, a simple list. The 1980s were really not a fruitful time. And this was also a problem because, again, you know, we have maybe 15 pharmacists. Information was not easily accessible. And what we noted is that, you know, we had a problem. We have a knowledge deficit problem as well as a communication problem. And so we said, we need to fix this. And so we went through our P&T committee to start the development of a compendium where we could have a tool, which is our formulary, that could be provided to all the members of our healthcare team so that we could all speak the same language, okay? With this, you know, and then to address communication issues, I had done a little test. And what we did was we called down to the pharmacy, you know, at random times and asked, let's say, 4 pharmacists the same question on what is the dose for this, drug X? And unfortunately, at that time, because we didn't have a centralized repository or a authorized dosing list, we got 4 different answers. That's a problem. So again, these were the issues that were sent to our P&T committee to say we need to move forward. And this is in, again, the 1980s BC. Just to give you another note, what did I do? I had to live in a garage, and we would hand type these little sheets, these drugs, staple it together, and every year we would give these little compendiums to our house staff. So the problem with these written books just like this, as soon as it's published, it's already outdated. That is a big problem. But our house staff became dependent on it. We also gave these little compendiums to our nursing units and to our pharmacy. And why? Because we wanted to establish that we were all speaking the same language. When we look at information regarding the types of medication errors in pediatric patients, I'm taking this data from the USP MedMarks 2006 to 2007. What happened before in the previous 5 years, there was approximately 29,800 medication errors that were reported for a pediatric type incidents. And then in 2006 to 2007, they analyzed what were the causes of these medication errors. 43% was considered a performance deficit, and that could be using the wrong technique to administer a drug, could be the wrong technique in diluting it, could be failure to document information such as was a patient allergic to a drug, or even failure to document a patient received the medication. The second one, knowledge deficit. I wonder, knowledge deficit. Now you kind of understand why we were using the formulary to address this issue. The knowledge deficit is really inaccessibility to pediatric dosing information. And that could be not only the prescriber, the pharmacist, and the nursing person at administration. That there wasn't good enough information out there that resulted in an error. And you know, with that inability to access information, you're kind of working in a blind black hole. And in that period of time, we were more or less, we get an order, dispense it, and give it out, and we weren't really able to double check dosing as well. The other thing I thought was interesting was 16.8% of the causes of medication errors was due to miscommunication. And many of these are the result of unclear orders. Okay. So when we drill down on medication error types in this same population, for pediatrics, lo and behold, and not to our surprise, wrong dose comes out as number 1. And there are so many reasons that wrong dose comes out. There are so many processes that are involved and steps that are involved in the pediatric medication process. It can be dilution of a drug, and you made the wrong dilution, so the wrong dose is delivered. There's an issue that, you know, our adult practitioners don't have to look at that we do, and that's the fact that all of our drug doses are weight-based or body surface area-based, and that requires additional steps to get the dose confirmed and delivered. So as you add more steps to the process, you have a opportunity to introduce error at all these steps. Prescribing errors was stated at 9.4%, and again, my take on this is the extra steps that a pediatrician has to go through to order a medication properly. And actually, the other thing that Martin would probably ask us to address is the fact that not only does the pediatrician have to write an order, this to initiate, but we always have to worry about the fact that pediatric patients are always changing and developing. That means you have to review what's the new weight, and you have to redo that order again for changes in weight, changes in developmental maturity. That is just adding that many more steps to the ordering process. Aha! Well, again, many of you may be too young to understand this, but I call a prescription pad a blank canvas for the artists, which is our prescribers, to be very creative in terms of what they put on this canvas. It's unstructured, okay? So what we saw is that prescribers could do whatever they needed to do to get their information across, but that didn't mean that the person who received the information could understand it. Just looking at these beautiful prescriptions, do you know what they say? Just a random question to you. Well, what the result of this type of ordering process is that we see illegible handwriting and missing information in our orders. So that results in reduced efficiency because then we end up having to call the prescriber to clarify those orders. Before we went on CPOE, we did a review and we found that, of our pharmacist interventions, and we were doing, let's say, 400 a month, 50% of the pharmacy calls were to call the prescriber to clarify orders. Since 2004, when we went live with CPOE, incomplete orders decreased by 67%. Medication errors per 1,000 patients' days decreased by 23%. Allergy documentation improved by 33%. And medication errors causing harm was reduced by 30%. So CPOE has a dramatic impact in terms of the prescriber, but putting up CPOE alone doesn't solve, the ultimate issue of reducing total medication errors. And the other area that we are involved with now is, again, the barcode scanning and administration, and we hope that introducing that technology will almost eliminate most of our medication errors. Communication, one of the things that we incorporated into our formulary is tall man lettering. Drug name confusion can be a cause of medication errors. Just for an example, the FDA reported a situation where 260 milligrams of Taxol was ordered, but the patient received 260 milligrams of Taxotere and several days later passed away. So again, this is an issue. On the next slide, you can see that if you align all your drugs alphabetically and you're in a hurry, you're interrupted, sometimes you can see that, some drugs don't stand out. And what we would see is that people would select, maybe they're supposed to be using cyclophosphamide, they select cyclosporin out of haste because they're right next to each other. And so we use tall man lettering to accentuate the differences of drug names that look alike. For our formulary process, we do an FMEA, which is a failure mode and effects analysis when we're adding a drug to the formulary to look at where are the areas where we might have errors, and it's at this it is at this time where we review any reports of errors that could be related to drug name confusion, and it is also at that step in the process where we decide whether tall man lettering will be used. Tall man lettering is really used as a communication tool to alert the healthcare team that they're handling a drug that is high risk and has a similar name to other drugs in the formulary. The naming convention, or the tall man lettering naming convention, is integrated and aligned throughout the medication use process. What do I mean by that? The tall man lettering is incorporated into the computer drug formulary. It appears at the time when you're doing drug selection. The labeling of the drug also incorporates tall man lettering. And then for the nurse at the EMR, which is our electronic medical administration record, they see the same thing. So we're all seeing the same lettering. We all are speaking the same language. I mean, again, this is an issue of, having the same information disseminated throughout the continuum. And just for your information, we have patient instruction sheets that are that can be printed or viewed by the patient in their room. They also have tall man lettering on the patient leaflet. Although pharmacy does not actually dispense radio contrast agents, again, we had a report where the nurse was confused in terms of a radio contrast agent and asked that we do tall man lettering on that agent. And so, even though we don't label or we don't dispense this product at the EMAR level, the nurse is able to see that the drug has tall man lettering and to be more to handle it in that manner. To me, when families have been asked, what do they want from their child's health care team, what do you think they say? Well, number one, they say, don't hurt me. And that means we need to continue to look at safety issues to prevent medication problems. Then they say, please be nice to me. And to me, that means communicate with them. And finally, they say, please heal me. And to me, that means prescribers need to optimize therapy so that all these requests are met. We use the drug formulary to provide information to our prescribers on what drug indications are FDA approved. We put that information on the use, and we also state what the age for the FDA approval encompasses. When we have a situation where we need to use a drug that may not have FDA-approved indications for that age, we also include information on clinical practice guidelines that can be clicked, and then you're able to access a link that provides information on how the drug is recommended in these clinical practice guideline settings, along with references. So for an example, pentamidine, I don't know if you if you administer pentamidine to your immunosuppressed children, but it's not FDA approved in, let's say, an 8-year-old. We would, if someone needed some support by references, then we have a clinical practice guideline that has information that, this is the dose you would use in a pediatric patient. Another example of how the drug formulary lists the FDA-approved indications for use, but again, for unlabeled use, that doesn't mean you can't use the drug in this scenario. What we try and do for unlabeled use, again, is to provide links to literature that supports the use of the product. Why are we doing this more? I will tell you that a lot of the payment for drugs used in unlabeled situations are contested by our major payers. And so we provide the prescriber with references that they can use to provide their authorization to the payer. Drug standardization. Within the practice of medicine and pharmacy, there is currently no standardization of the final concentration of compounded oral liquids. As a result, significant variation in available concentrations of compounded oral liquids can potentially lead to medication errors. The above statement also applies to drug infusion solutions that have to be compounded. What's interesting is 60% of oral liquids dispensed, at least in the United States, are unavailable commercially and require compounding. In a 2014 Michigan study, they assessed 147 oral liquid pediatric medications and they were assessing it for their compounding practices in 244 pharmacies. How many different variations do you think they found for these 147 drugs that are ordered? I think this was the surprising piece, is that The number of concentrations compounded per medication ranged from 1 to 9 different concentrations, with the majority of pharmacies compounding at least 3 or more different concentrations for the same drug. That's a bit scary. What can happen without concentration standardization? Well, in this alert that we received from our Joint Commission colleagues, a prescription was written using the patient's hospital standard concentration of enoxaparin. The patient's prescription, has all that information. It went out to a retail pharmacy, and the retail pharmacy decided to fill that prescription with an adult standard concentration, and that resulted in a 10-time overdose and, of course, a readmission. This type of scenario, unfortunately, is not uncommon. I mean, we see, you can imagine if you have all these drugs that have the variability in concentration, and who is deciding that? There's no standards. We see this also. So, this is a big gap in terms of where we are in terms of pediatric safety. And, this is, again, an area where I ask you, those with power, to encourage our manufacturers to help manufacture some of these formulations that are pediatric friendly. The other reason for concentration, how do you handle this when you're discharging a patient? It's very important that, when you're instructing your patient, that you are, you know what you were giving in the hospital, you know the concentration and dose. You need to reconcile that with what is being dispensed in the outpatient area to make sure that the patient is getting the same dose. And again, this will help, not completely eliminate, but this will help prevent some medication errors. Dose standardization. Why did we work on automating dose standardization? I'm not saying that we automated dose standardization for all drugs, but we did work with our P&T committee on select drugs to do automated dose standardization. What our survey showed is that with this method, we counted the number of steps it took for us to call the prescriber and say, oh, can you change your cefazolin dose from 510 milligrams to 500 milligrams? We counted those steps, and it was rather shocking to all of us. And, prescribers don't want to get a phone call for something like that. And so we all agreed as a group that this is a righteous, initiative, and so we developed tables like this where if the dose ended up between this range, this is the standardized dose that you would get. The prescriber always has the ability to override it, but otherwise it's automatically populated in the dose field. Hopefully with this type of dosing, we're seeing this is going to improve our dispensing process. We're able to prepare drugs more efficiently. We need to do this more for our oral liquids because weight-based dose calculations end up with some crazy doses, and so that's our next initiative, is to start tackling our oral medications, oral liquid medications in the same pattern. Okay, how can we best protect our patients and eliminate serious harm? I think my take-home message is that we do use our pediatric formularies to speak and communicate the same language, and this is the need to communicate the same safety language among all the healthcare team members as well as our patients and caregivers. The other issue here is I encourage you to optimize, standardize, and simplify pediatric drug therapy to improve our outcomes. But as I said earlier, we need research to show that we make a difference with outcomes, and that is one of the areas where we do not see enough data. Unfortunately, I'm going to be leaving prior to the panel discussion today, so I'm asking you if you have questions, please feel free to ask right now, or during the lunchtime, I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay?